I'm a disabled veteran, and my experience with depression started before I went in the military. At the age of 16, I signed up for Vietnam, and I wanted to commit suicide. And then when I went in the military later on, I had a challenging job. And what it did, it had me in structure to where though I never addressed the depression. But years later, when I came out of the military after 13 years, I received a diagnosis that I didn't want to accept because I was living in a culture where we don't speak on being having those stigmas that he was talking about. We don't speak on being depressed, and we don't speak on having a psychological problem. And it was a cliche of man up, and I had to live with that experience for a long time. And I found myself going past my mother's house and finding out she had a stack of mail, and it was all from the IRS, all the different jobs I've kept going to and walking off of, and wondering why I did it. So my experience was to say I couldn't afford medication, so I self-medicated. And later on, I became very compulsive and insidious with my behaviors that my mind would always say, end this now. So the most important thing about going and getting help for me was that I became educated on some of the things that was going on, whereas though prior to that, I wasn't educated. And I didn't know much about this Greek language of diagnosis that you all have. And now that I know, I'm learning to pronounce some of them. And basically, what I'm saying is that I didn't receive society in my life until I turned 50. And I ended up getting a wife at that period of time. And I'm still experiencing the family, spouse, and romantic relationship thing today. You know, I don't sleep in the same room with her most of the time, and our conversations are short. And the relationship is beautiful, but how do you handle someone that don't want to receive success? And isolation, feeble positions, all of these things that goes on. And you have a family over here now. And then they offer me medications like you were talking about earlier. The medications, sometimes they work and then other times they don't work. It's like a roller coaster. And now I'm in the rejection stage of my life. Not only do I reject medicine, I reject society.
I hear you. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think that I think it hasn't really much been mentioned, the stigma of depression and the effects that has on your willingness to seek help and treatment and become, more educated yourself about your condition. It sort of is very isolating. Are there any other comments in the room? Okay, here's one over there, and then one more, and then I think we have to move on.
Thank you. Kara Ultimus, when I think about impact on life, I think about being raised by two parents that suffered from depression and being a child. And I can look back now and know moments that I saw as highly unpredictable and scary as moments of depression that they were experiencing, where they would go from normal to removed to angry, and managing that as a little person, and how that's changed me and my expectation about the world and people around me, and the ability to connect with them, especially as a child. My father in particular, I didn't connect with till I was an adult with diagnosed depression, and one of our major moments was talking about what that was like and how to manage medication, which is kind of bizarre. But then as a parent now, I think about how do I manage myself to not carry that another generation forward? How do I make myself more predictable so that my daughter isn't trying to manage or understand me, so that she won't be in her 20s or 30s thinking back to those moments to understand what childhood was and why? And then earlier you asked this question about how those moments of depression affect other points in life. And I can speak personally and say that most of the time I'm fine. And I have some very brief, dark periods of intense depression. And those periods feed into my psyche on all the other days for what can I take on and what can I do and what jobs am I best for, even though those are great days and even though those moments are few and far between. And so I do think that that matters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine Wickman. I wanted to address some of the financial circumstances. My very first depression, I was 14, and I didn't know what it was, and I ended up immediately quitting my job. So even from the beginning, it affected me. I haven't been able to work full-time since 2007. When I was working, I wasn't able to make it through a month without having to take sick leave. So I was perceived as being very unreliable. I was not able to interact with my supervisors in a, I was imagining things and like all of those kind of things. So I was not able to interact with the supervisors in a way that I could advance. Even once I finally found a medication that worked, and all of a sudden my depression was diminished, I realized it was like, oh my God, this is how other people are interacting. This is the kind of relationships that they're having. But then I realized that I had so many bad habits due to the way I was interacting under depression. So that made it very hard, even when things had cleared up to some degree. I was constantly maxing out my, I can't remember what they're called, but the annual health leave things. Because I haven't been and spent a fortune on treatments, because I've been underemployed for so many years, I haven't had money going into 401k. I haven't been able to do any long-term planning. So, financially in the past and the present, I'm not making as much money, and in the future, this is going to affect how I'm going to be able to take care of myself. And for the sake of brevity, I'll drop.
Thank you. I think those are very helpful and important points to make. And again, there's what I sense and see here is a lot of interactions between things. Patterns that build up, how it affects how you're perceived on your job, which in turn affects your financial situation, and it keeps going around. And the idea is, I think, how do you break out of that cycle? So thanks to everybody who participated. Now I'd like to turn to another topic, and I'm going to explore some of the responses from the Supporting Wellness Survey. As Michael Pollack shared earlier, DBSA had a tremendous response to the Supporting Wellness Survey, which I want to make sure you know continues until December 31st. So if you haven't participated, please do. Over 6,000 peers have responded so far. So we want to use some of our time today, to explore in more detail some of the responses to the survey. As you can see from the slide, 43% of respondents shared that their overall health had worsened since first experiencing symptoms of depression. There are many reasons why people could be experiencing an overall decline in health, and time today won't permit us to explore all of them. But we would like to explore the impact living with both depression and another health condition might have in contributing to the response that the overall health has declined. And I think Dr. Sachs showed some statistics on this as well, about the effect of depression on your overall quality of life. So take a look at this. These are sort of the uh, some of the issues that come up when you start talking about what the demands of depression on your whole health are. We're going to work this the same way we did the previous discussion. DBSA staff have the microphones. If you want to comment, raise your hand. If you're participating via the webcast, type your comment into the comment section, and we'll be able to read some of them aloud. Again, try and be brief so that we can hear from as many people as possible. Keep your remarks, if you can, to 1 minute or less. And let's try and sort of stay on this topic if we can. We'll be handling other topics, later in the session. And so if you have something that deals with something else, we can come to that later. And just to, I think just to kick this off, I'm going to build on what one of our panelists said. Shelby shared that it's difficult for her to manage the symptoms of both polycystic ovarian syndrome and depression at the same time. So when you're thinking about the demands of managing your whole health, how do you balance the strategies of treating one condition versus another? Can anybody address how you do this juggling? Go ahead.
Thank you. 11 years ago, I was diagnosed with a neurological disorder called dystonia. And it's a basal ganglia portion of my brain misfiring and causing my face and neck and eyes to spasm. When that diagnosis came through, the only thing I could think about was, how am I going to kill myself without killing myself through my family? I didn't want them to know I was going to take my own life. I researched, went through everything. This was all happening at the same time as divorcing my husband, so I just had one more thing that I needed to deal with. Over time, with a lot of prayer and a lot of strength that I really don't even know where it came from, but it came, I was able to get to a good place with my dystonia. And then I found a fantastic group of people at Pocono Hospital, DBSA Pocono Mountain, and they have helped me so much with the depression side of it. They've guided me, and that was something that I needed so much, because you can only take so much on your plate before you just say, okay, I'm out of here. This isn't going to happen. This isn't going to work. So dealing with both of these conditions, the neurological piece of it and then the depression side of it. Right now, what I do when I feel myself going down, I give myself 2 days. You've got 2 days to crawl out of this hole. And honestly, it doesn't usually take me 2 days anymore. It may just be an afternoon, but I sit on the couch and I have my little pity party. And then I pick myself up, brush myself off, and move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm going to just give you a little different perspective. Both my kids were diagnosed with long QT syndrome probably about 10 years ago. And the thing the cardiologist said to us is, hope they don't get depressed, because all the antidepressants elongate the QT interval. So fast forward this past August, my son tried to kill himself. We can't get a medication that he can take because of the long QT. So he's on something that elongates the QT. So we're risking that part, all hoping, he had a sympathectomy done, which reduces the adrenaline in his heart. But there's got to be medication out there that will work with that diagnosis.
I think that's a really good example of the trade-offs that you have to make and how difficult these are with the limitations on the medications and the side effects of the medications that exist today, for both conditions. And hopefully they'll learn more about what causes, for example, prolongation of the QT interval.
As a caregiver, I'll just speak on behalf of my daughter who happens to live with major depression and polycystic ovarian syndrome. And she called me one night and said, after visiting with her psychiatrist trying to find a remedy for both, and she said in tears, I guess I'm going to have to decide between my physical pain or my mental pain. And she said, I can't live with the mental pain, so I guess I'll just have to learn to live with the physical pain. And that's the trade-off many of us have to make.
So I could definitely identify with Molly and Shelby. I also live with PCOS, and especially, so this would have been late 90s, early 2000s. The PCOS was all about a lifestyle disease, so just eat better. And it was done in such a stigmatizing way, but eating has been, a coping mechanism, and I'm always working on self-soothing tools, but sometimes it's between, cake and suicide. So, which again, it's which one are you going to live with? Is it going to be the hormonal imbalance because I can't take care of myself physically, or am I going to comply with my therapist and do these other things to take care of my mental health? So I definitely identify with that.
Hi, Sasha Adi, Executive Director of PCOS Challenge. Don't mean to have this be a PCOS party, but it's quite relevant to the, just the discussion that we're having is my personal story. When I was diagnosed with PCOS, a gynecologist told me to come back to see her and to go to an endocrinologist. Endocrinologist told me to lose weight and come back to see him in 6 months. So I tried to go see a nutritionist, but I was told insurance won't cover that because I wasn't diabetic, one of the very things I was trying to prevent. So many of us as patients feel like we have to take so much on to control not only our conditions that we're diagnosed with, but the comorbidities, and manage medications, manage relationships, manage everything. Yet we're left alone. We felt let down. And there needs to be a huge overhaul in how we view the body, the female body specifically, as well, in our experience with our health and wellness. And understand that, okay, PCOS may not be just a reproductive disorder. It affects whole health, and it affects quality of life. Many of us have trouble maintaining relationships, maintaining jobs, and in academics because of dealing with depression and other things that are not. We don't have access to the proper management and proper healthcare team. So, thank you.
Does anyone have any comments on the strategies that they use to manage both depression and another health condition if they can't afford to treat both? If it's a financial issue, how do they make that decision? And another question I'd like to address is how do you get your clinicians to work together? There's been a lot of discussion about how your clinicians don't talk to each other, and they don't, each one is treating their own aspect of you, but not the whole you. So either of those questions.
Well, the application, that's what I call it. The application itself, I had to do what they call get a toolbox and put some tools in it. And the first tool that I started using was a hammer. That means every time you said something to me, I would hammer your comment. I would just hammer it. And I learned that there were other tools available to put in my toolbox. So what I did was I went and I found out through education and application that, I can receive some of these tools for myself. it took a desire and a willingness to do this. And now I have a toolbox with plenty of tools in there today. And what I do is I humble myself more than I ever done before. And I think about the tools that are needed for the specific job instead of just grabbing anything out the box. And what that do for me today is that it keeps me on track to continue to practice these things.
Thank you.
And say to myself that this is what I have to do in order for me to be able to be sociable with society.
Thank you. We have one more, I think.
You asked about strategies. For me, it was called California Closets.
Uh-huh.
When I moved into my new home, I realized that I could put my car in the garage and realized that wasn't a great idea. So I got California Closets, and cannot get my car in my garage. And my friends laugh, and people around me laugh, but those who know about my brain disease don't laugh, and they go, "We're really glad you can't get in your garage."
Thank you. Okay, I think we have to move on. Hopefully, some of what you might want to say will come up in one of the other sessions. So now I'd like to change course and talk about a different impact of living with depression might have on your life. In the Supporting Wellness Survey, 86% selected as a high priority when asked about aspects of wellness, ability to be independent or act according to my own will. So we want to understand a little bit about what that means to you. So we're going to go back and use a polling question. I'm not going to go over the details of this. I think you all got it really well on how to do this. The question is, when reflecting on ability to be independent or act according to my own will, which best defines this aspect for you? A, ability to do work I have done previously or have received training or advanced education to do. B, ability to engage in social activities that I've enjoyed in the past. C, ability to explore new employment, training, or academic opportunities. D, ability to explore new leisure time activities or social situations. E, all of the above. And F, I don't know. Hopefully you'll pick just, each of you pick one. I'm going to just wait for a minute or so until the bars stop moving. Okay. Well, this will be difficult to deal with. All of the above. all of the above. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start with other, um, with the one that isn't listed. So, if anybody who chose other would like to help us to understand what item is missing from the list, is it anybody in the room who'd like to address that? If not, I'm gonna go to A and C. Ability to do work that you've done previously or have received training to do, and then related to that is that's looking back and doing what you used to be able to do, and the next is doing something new employment, training, or academic opportunities. Would somebody like to speak who picked one or the other of those?
Hi, my name's Kim. I'm a registered nurse. When I had my breakdown, my colleagues blackballed me. I don't practice as a nurse anymore because of the stigma. So Now I'm a peer specialist. I work through the VA. Thank you. And thank God I found the VA, or I would be homeless still.
Thank you for sharing that. Over here?
Yeah, my name's Eric. For me, I was in a situation with both depression. It's been now considered treatment-resistant depression, and have other comorbid health condition that contributes clearly to the depression. I went through a period of unemployment, significant unemployment, and eventually had to make the decision to go on disability, which was a very difficult decision to make. I mean, because it felt like failure, felt like admitting to failure. What I found, though, was I made a decision that, well, I'll apply for disability because, well, maybe I won't get it. I mean, it's hard to get. Or maybe by the time the disability is approved, my depression will have somehow miraculously gone away, or I would have won the Powerball or something, and then life would have changed. I was fortunate to get disability. I also, as I was going through that process, began to get involved with a number of volunteer organizations here in the DC area, which gave me a sense of purpose and sense of meaning. So it was the combination of the financial resources of the disability. I'm fortunate I got a fairly good disability payment, and being able to structure my life financially. I can live. I'm on about 40% of what I used to live on. So I don't live in the retirement. I'm retired now, and people say, "Oh, that's great. You're retired. You can go off and do stuff." Well, no, I really can't. But my symptoms are now sort of managed. I'm still depressed. I've actually been in a depressive state for the last couple months, really, for a variety of reasons, and I'm aware of that, and we're working with my psychiatrist on that. Well, I want to go back to your previous question when you asked about how do you coordinate things. I actually am in an integrated healthcare practice, and I have found that to be very helpful because my psychiatrist and the mental health people are in the same building as my primary doctors, and so that has been very helpful. So, but basically for me, it's the combination of getting some meaningful volunteer work and meaningful and then the financial stability.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think I might have moved too hastily by not addressing the 56% that said all of the above, because that means that some of those 56% would have the disability, problems engaging in social activities that they've enjoyed in the past, and also are concerned about the ability to explore new leisure time activities or social situations. Would somebody in the 56% like to address those two things, which we haven't really talked about? Anybody? No? And would anybody who said other like to say something? I really would be very interested, I think, in hearing any responses to this from that are not listed here, or any aspects of this that are not listed. Nobody on the web? Nope. Hey guys, come on. There's somebody. Okay.
Hi. The reason I chose all of the above is that my experience with depression shut me off from everything. So I no longer had the job that I had before my major depressive episode. I isolated myself. When you don't have a job, you don't have structure in your day, you don't have energy, you don't pursue leisure activities. When I was first luckily laid off and not just fired, people say, well, that's great, you've got all the free time you need. It's like, yeah, but I'm not bringing any money to write the checks for the things that I'd like to do with the free time I now have. And it's made it very difficult to get back into the workforce at a level at which I believe I could be capable. And some of that is confidence, and some of that is cognitive loss. You don't think as well when you're depressed. And so it really impacts my entire life in ways that, lead me to the all of the above category.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. There's a Lisa.
I think I read the question differently than most people. I did answer in the 56%, but I want to speak to the 11%, if I'm reading it incorrectly. And I want to speak to this gentleman's comment about finding the spark or the will, or just, I guess if I'm answering to the 11%, I think I would include in this category of your own self-talk and finding, as a source of maybe where the depression and anxiety comes from. So I guess I would include that in this question as well, if I'm going to speak to 11%.
Great, thank you. We have one over here.
I'm going for a long shot here. For instance, when somebody has been in a job and they've been injured on that job and they go out on workers' compensation, they're afraid of how they're perceived by the public. Oh, look at him. He's out on workers' compensation, yet he's out walking a block. With this, wait a minute, here's this person that is, they don't have the ability to work because they're so depressed and they're so this and they're so that, yet they're out taking a walk in the woods. Now, how can they do that if they're so depressed that they don't want to leave their house, but they're leaving their house? All of these things. It's like our perception of how we feel we're being perceived by others. Like, are we supposed to stay in the dark? Is that part of it? Are we afraid if we are doing something proactive, are we going to be looked at as like, there's nothing wrong with you. If you can do that, you can do this job. You can take these classes. You can do all of these things. Because people don't understand that you don't stay in the dark 24 hours a day. You do have good times. You do have times when you can function and you can do these things. That's all.
Thank you. So it relates to the stigma. I think the stigma aspect that people have raised a couple of times now. We have another comment, okay?
Yeah, I just think it all goes together, right? The social aspect, the work aspect. When I've gone through difficult periods of depression and I haven't felt like I've been able to socialize, then that lack of confidence bleeds over into my work day and my ability to perform at my work. And on the same token, when I feel like I don't have the confidence to be able to perform at my job, then I have no interest in going out and socializing because I feel I have nothing to offer when I'm in conversations with people. So they both play into each other, in my experience.
So they relate to each other, and one affects the other. Can I just explore a little bit? What does it mean to you to be independent or act according to your own will? Does anybody want to sort of address what that actually means to them? What would you, because part of what we're going to talk about in the next session is going to be treatment outcomes and what would you like in terms of what would you like to see? So before we sort of break, which is like we have about a minute or two to break, before we break, what if ability to be independent or act according to your own will is important, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
Hi. So I've been told by providers quite a few times that I shouldn't work, and I should not seek out peer support for like not being able to trust someone else with mental health issues, both of which I felt were really counterproductive and dangerous. And I think that kind of goes with the traditional model of mental health treatment, where you're supposed to kind of appear stable and in sort of a stable place before you can work, or even start experimenting with work or looking for work. And so I spent months not working, and I really wasn't sure why I wasn't working. And that's been very harmful.
One more. This will be, I think, our last comment, and then we're going to
Hi, my name is Vanna. I think I wanted to speak to your question about what will and determination is about and how that gets intertwined with attempting to partners with care providers who can be put in places where they're given a lot of, I think we as a society, we give medical care providers a lot of power in giving us a diagnosis. And so part of the legacy of cultivating health is to step away and understand what resonates and what doesn't resonate. And for me, what's been tremendously exciting in this field is a shift in some of the language that we're consumers of medical services. And I think it gives us a lot more power in situations where we're dealing with people who are there to help us problem solve. And it's not such a hierarchical dynamic.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think it's time for our break. We're going to take a short break, and we'll start back promptly at 2:45. Okay, thanks so much.